Hello, so today I'm going to be going over some of the most important units in set 16. These are going to be all units that give either team-wide buffs or provide you with utilities such as anti-heal or shred or sundering effects that you can use in place of making those particular items, as well as to optimize your final boards if given the circumstance or in a situation where you're unable to make the items. If you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe. I normally do daily TFT guides. I also stream on YouTube now, but basically I try and do daily guides, and that's going to continue for set 16. So if you want to stay up to date with set 16, this is us prepping for set 16 before it releases on December 3rd. And then obviously I'm going to be doing all of the same guides that you know and love, but with the set 16 twist once it comes out. So anyways, I'm going to go through all of these. I've broke them down and kind of group the units a little bit, and I'll put little labels, and then if you want you can maybe screenshot it or keep it on tabs or just memorize some of the things. But first thing I want to talk about is just like the standard utility style of things. So we have our sundering, which is like armor reduction, right? So I'll put like minus armor. Then we have our shred, which is minus magic resist, and then we have burn / wound, which is usually like anti-heal, right? We also have reduction here, and these ones are like reduced like certain amounts of stats of armor or magic resist. So usually the ones that you would normally look at is the Targon units. The Targon units are the main ones you can just slot in. They have no traits, but Aphelios, for example, applies a 30% sunder, which is as good as a sundering item, so this is perfect. Aatrox also provides a sundering effect, however it's only on his first hit because he has like a cycling through multiple hits, and it applies 20%, so it's not as good as an Aphelios if you're looking for just the sundering effect. Additionally, there are reduction effects here, which is Callista and Gangplank, where they have a little, I'll scroll down a little bit. So, they reduce armor, for example, Callista when she's hitting with the spears, and then also you reduce the target's armor with the barrels with the Gangplank. So this is flat reduction. Usually percentage reduction is better, but in a combination of flat reduction with the regular, like they can both serve a similar purpose depending on how much armor and magic resist the opponent has. In terms of shred, the only unit that I think applies proper shred is Zoe. I might have missed somebody, but for right now, the one that I normally gravitate towards is just plugging Zoe because she also does a decent amount of damage. She applies 30% shred, so that's reducing magic resist to optimize your AP damage. In terms of burning and wounding, Leona has burn and wound effect. One of the big ones is Annie. After her first cast, she basically applies burn wound to the entire board, which is incredible. So she's one of those units that you can just slot in. And then also Tibber scales off burn wound, right? If they're burning, he gets extra healing. So you can kind of have this like impossible to deal with tank when you have like an Annie upgraded and you plug them into your board. And then I put these reductions, these last couple ones. Kog'Maw, Garen, as well as Fiddlesticks. They have like a hard reduction. Fiddlesticks is his Harvester trait. In Harvester, all enemies lose 10 armor and magic resist. These ones reduce both of them, right? So Kog'Maw reduces armor and magic resist by a flat number, and so does Garen. So these are your like basic utility stuff, but the main ones are usually the Targon units. All three of these low-cost Targons, those are the ones that you can easily slot in to get any sort of burn wound, shred sunder, or that type of effect, so to speak. Next, I want to talk a little bit about just like team-wide buffs or a little bit. So we have some healing and shielding. So these units apply heals and shields to your boards. Like I said, I might have missed some other units, but Seraphine can heal different allies when she applies her wave damage in the second part of her cast. Additionally, Sona can do some extra healing on the lowest health ally. One unit I missed, actually, I do know I missed them, I apologize, is Kabuko. I just put him in a separate section because he has a really good buff. But Yuumi and Kabuko, whether Kabuko is alive or not, Yuumi will basically join onto a different unit. And then she will either give them attack speed or heal, basically alternating between the two with the lowest health ally as well. Then with shielding, you know, Shen can shield an ally, Poppy can shield an ally after she shields her buckler, and then also Orianna can also shield the two lowest allies as well. So if you're looking for some extra survivability, these ones can add a little bit of extra bonus, but usually you're just playing them with your team, and it's just like, you know, the units that kind of benefit from those boards with these units in particular. Next, I want to talk about Chill. So Chill is actually really popular and apparent on this set. This is usually something that's like a little bit like like, you know, somewhat like good, somewhat bad. Chill is a reduction in your opponent's attack speed. So if you chill an opponent, they will just get reduced attack speed. The reason chill is so important is because Freljord champions all have built-in effects where they either apply chill or scale really well off of chill. So for example, you'll see a lot of the Freljord units, they apply a 30% chill. So you have 30% chill from Sejuani, and then if they're chilled, you get a stun. You have Ashe that provides a chill, and then you also have Braum that provides a chill. The reason this is really strong because, like I said, with the Freljord units, all the other Freljord units scale off of chill, which actually makes it really important because not only do you have the chill effect that's debuffing your opponent, but also you'll have a unit like Lissandra, for example. Chilled enemies will take 12% more damage, so you get 12% damage buff if you're attacking a chilled enemies, and they kind of work like that. Like half the Freljord units apply chill, and then half the units scale off the chill, which is really important. And then additionally, there's other units that chill. So Doric has a chill effect, and then it raises mana cost, so he has like a little bit of an other effect that kind of can debuff or annoy your opponents, but it's 20% on all of these units as well. So these are other ways of getting chill if you're slotting them in with a Freljord board that can also proc the effects of the other Freljord units that scale off of the chill if you want to do so in your games. Let me just remove this. Next, this board is going to be filled with a lot of units, but basically, this board is going to be stuns / knock-up. Now, knock-up and stun, for all intents and purposes, they're very similar in TFT, but knock-up is a little bit different. But basically, these are like interrupting your opponent in some way. I tried to group them in terms of like the larger stuns versus the weaker stuns. But in general, the two main stun units that you should be thinking of usually are Skarner and Swain. Swain, I think, is the resident stun bot, which will probably find his way on many different boards. Think like your Jarvan in set 15. Think your Sejuani in set 14. Think your Elise in set 13. I'm trying to give you guys some parallels there to try and think it up. But Swain is the big one, right? Swain is the big one. This is the 4 cost. He has 3 traits. You're probably going to find a way to slot him onto your board for some reason, and the stun that he provides is pretty massive. It's pretty large, so that's usually the big one. In terms of other units that provide stun, obviously there's lots of really powerful stuns in the game, borderline broken. A lot of them are tied to like the unlocks and some of the higher cost units, so obviously it's going to be like, you know, all sorts of crazy here and there. But of course we have Fiddlesticks that provides a really powerful stun when he jumps in on his first cast. Galio obviously provides a really big stun. Shurima Rise, so specifically if you have the Shurima trait active, Rise has probably one of the best stuns in the game, just like chain CCing people off of his cast. And then obviously you have Brock. Tom Kench can eat and then spit out and stun people, but he also like just eats somebody and removes them from the fight entirely. But then additionally, if you want the low cost stuns, Loris and Kennen are 2 of the larger ones, I would say. 2 of the more powerful stuns that seem to be very impactful. But then also Sejuani, once you have the chill effects procced, as well as Cho'Gath, can work really well. Aesol also gets a stun eventually when you level him up, so that is also another option. And then I also put some other additional stuns. A lot of these are like, you know, 1 second or brief knockups or brief stuns in these cases, but there's just so many. I probably even missed a couple of them that also provide stun. Just know there's a lot of ways of interrupting units, especially if you're playing a melee carry. Things like Titans and QSS might be really popular this set just because there's lots of little ways to interrupt, especially with some of the really high cost unlocks. Their stuns are extremely powerful. In addition to like just these ones, it can just be absolute nuisances. So positioning, as well as like having good anti-stun properties, like, you know, QSS and Titans are the big ones, right? Titans for later in the fight, it scales you, and then QSS is start of the fight and scales you with attack speed. Those might be essential on a lot of melee builds. Next, I want to just talk about like team-wide benefits. So these ones are just gonna be like miscellaneous benefit. I'm gonna put miscellaneous Benny for miscellaneous benefits, and we'll just kind of go over them. So Jarvan, for example, he provides your whole team attack speed, which is just like good. Most units love to have attack speed. Kabuko I put here as just as a great unit to slot in. I think a lot of boards, if you can fit in these synergies, Kabuko's a great unit, because basically Kabuko comes with Yumi. It's Kabuko and Yumi, and basically while Kabuko's doing his thing, Yumi basically alternates between different units on your board, either granting attack speed to an ally that is doing the most damage, so that's usually your carry is going to get bonus attack speed, which is a huge plus, or alternating to a unit that has the lowest amount of health and giving them some and healing them a little bit. So especially if your backline carry is about to get sniped, Yumi can just go in and heal. It's kind of like a built-in, like, you know, running around Gunblade kind of effect is how you can kind of think about it, but then also giving attack speed to your strongest ally, which is pretty powerful. Taric and Skarner are kind of hand in hand in granting your whole team resistances. So Taric will give your whole team magic resist, and then Skarner will give your whole team armor. So these are two units that you can easily slot in. Skarner, even though he's Ixtal, his unlock condition isn't that bad. You just have to make a stone plate. Stone plate, you know, depending on your situation, might not be the best item to make, but it's not like the worst item you can make in a lot of cases. So it's not that bad of an unlock. And then of course he just grants your whole team armor. If you're fighting predominantly against AD, this can be really impactful and really powerful for everybody. And then also, we already talked about Skarner before being one of the better stuns in the game. I think Skarner's stun is maybe the most obnoxious for a unit. 2.25 seconds. It's probably gonna get nerfed at one point. And he also scales off armor, so if you have like a Skarner Giga Tank and he's just like stunning people, it can be really massive. I put off to the side these two units. Warwick buffs some units. It's specifically the Jinx and the Vi, which usually when you're playing for Warwick, it's unlocked via hitting Jinx and Vi upgrades. So there you can get some attacks on those specific units. Diana could also kind of debuffs your opponent. She provides like a damage reduction effect of 10% when she applies her Moonlight stacks, but she also works hand in hand in Leona. So I kind of put her in this off to the side with Warwick. These are a little bit more situational in how they benefit your board. Some other miscellaneous benefits. Kindred is just like all over the place, right? Because Kindred has this effect where like, how do I phrase it? Like she makes it so your team can't die, right? Basically, she does this zone. In this zone, you're like, where is it? It explained somewhere, right? Like, this zone heals your allies, which is really nice. But then there's also an effect where she prevents people from dying. Here it is. Dash and create a 2x radius zone for X amount of time that prevents allies from dying. So she can literally, like, make people just live forever, right? If Kindred times herself right with her cast, or you get her to cast very, very fast, like, very often, you can often save people from death with this. But also it has, like, the healing effect, so I put it as team-wide benefit. These ones are a little bit weird, though, right? Obviously, I put a 0 here because you get the extra front line. Just a great unit to slot in if you're looking for somebody to throw it on your board. You get 2 extra frontline or backliners, but you can just like throw in the 2 target dummies because he just summons the 2 sand soldiers. Lucian and Senna, they have like reduction effects, but then they also when they switch to Senna, Senna can provide your team with a buff. And then also Thresh, I didn't know where to put, but Thresh has like the yoink effect, right? He can just grab people and throw them in the box, so this can be very disruptive for your opponent. So I wanted to just like put it in here as like a potential unit. Obviously hard to play around because of Shadow Isles, but just something that you can look for. Lastly, so we talked about all of the different types of utility, obviously. Shred and Sunder, this and Anti-Heal, these ones are going to be your main ones, and then obviously these ones, usually they just slot into your board however they do, but just for the sake of like explaining it and showing the units and maybe giving you guys a resource, I put them all on a team planner for you guys. And then obviously these ones miscellaneous buffs. The last thing I want to talk about, oh sorry, one last thing before the last part. These are units that provide you with, I'm going to say like XP, maybe it's resources. These ones are resources, right? So what do I mean by that? Draven can drop gold. Tahm Kench, if he kills a unit with his ult, he'll drop you components. Mel, if you farm enough, if you have her in long enough and she farms enough mana, because basically she steals mana and that's how she like does casts and stuff, she'll give you a radiant item. And then Ornn, every 4 turns he gives you an artifact. That's part of his blacksmith trait. So all of these units, they give you resources. So if you're looking for ways to infinitely scale or power up your board with extra resources, these are ones that can help you out quite a bit. Now, what I was going to say is that I also want to take note of some very important units to hold, not necessarily for their utility, but just for like the way the game kind of works with unlocks. For example, like there's a lot of unlocks that specifically require you to have one particular unit, right? So for example, if I read LeBlanc here, right? LeBlanc, her unlock condition is have a Scion with 2 items, right? Some of these make a lot of sense in that you're just playing towards the trait, and then you can just kind of like play around the stuff and just work on it and just like slot in different things. But for some units, like for example, I think one of the most important units to hold in this set by far is Jarvan. I think that if you see a Jarvan in your shop, you should almost always buy it, because the unlock condition for Scion is sell a 2-star Jarvan, sell a 2-star Garen, and sell a 2-star Lux. And I know that sounds like a crazy ask, but I have found myself in a lot of late game scenarios where I can easily slot in a Scion. And it's, you know, if you're level 9 and you're rolling a lot of gold and you're trying to find a way to optimize your board, it's not too hard to find the 2-star Lux, the 2-star Garen, even if you're not playing around Demacia or any of those traits. But the 2-star 2-star Jarvan is impossible to find. They lowered the odds of finding 1 cost on level 8 and level 9. It was part of the change they made to make it more likely to see 4 costs and 5 costs. They took those odds and they transferred it to 4 costs and 5 costs, which is a good change. But you are in Jarvan jail. It is so hard to find a Jarvan at late levels, and especially if you're trying to optimize for a for a Silas, it is very difficult. I think that Jarvan, like if I'm on stage 2 and I see Jarvan, you don't have to sell him in the same turn, by the way. If you sell the 2-star Jarvan early in the game, it still counts towards the the Silas quest. I'm confusing the names, but you know what I mean. So I think that if you see a Jarvan in your shop, you should always be buying this guy, because like you never know if you'll need to play Silas later in the game. Now, obviously, if you're playing around AD, probably not, but if you're playing around AP, there's always a potential that you might cap out your board around Silas being a 7-cost unit. So always look out for Jarvan. I think, like, you know, a lot of units, they have the unlock conditions with specific, right, like certain units, like, you know, Kennen have bruisers, Ionia, blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, I understand, like, you can say this for every unit, but because this guy specifically names Jarvan, right, this is some Yu-Gi-Oh! Summoning conditions bullshit, right, like, you need to have the Jarvan, and you will not find this guy later in the game. Like, it does not matter if you're uncontested, you will not find him later in the game. So always keep that option open by buying your Jarvans. Obviously, I'm not saying roll for Jarvan, I'm just saying, like, you know, if you see Jarvan and you're playing around AP, buy him, upgrade him, sell him, keep him on your bench, stuff like that. I think it's really important. Also, Shadow Isles, obviously if you see Viego's on stage 2, I always buy Viego on stage 2 just because Shadow Isles specifically needs you to start the chain with Viego as it is right now. So you need the 2-star Viego, and then you need to like kind of play into the line. If this just unlocks you being able to play any of the Shadow Isles units. You might not want to play Shadow Isles, but holding on to Viego's is really important, because if you have the Viego with the 2 items, then you can hit the Yorick, then with the Yorick you get Gwen, and then you get Callista. Like, you don't know if you'll need to play those units later, and I don't know how it's going to work when the set goes to live, but I think this is another 1 cost that's really important, because if you don't hit him early, you're just in a bad spot. Lastly, Leona, same thing. Leona, I would hold on to, because not only she's super useful because she's a really good tank, being a Targon unit, they're supposed to be more powerful as their base, because they're just like, you know, good on their own without any synergies. But then additionally, she applies the anti-heal, burn and wound, which is great. Can make you very strong in your mid game. You don't have to make burning or wounding or anti-heal items. You can postpone that until a lot later and focus on damage items to optimize your boards for mid game. But then also, she's like the condition to unlock Diana, which eventually unlocks Aurelian Soul if you end up playing around Targon as well. But of these ones, I would say Jarvan for sure is one of the most important ones. Lastly, in terms of units that are important to hold, this little trio is important. Here I put Rise. They just changed Rise. Here it still says field 4 region traits to unlock Rise. It is now 5 region traits. Because it's 5 region traits to unlock Rise, it's actually very, very specific in terms of how you can unlock him early if you so want to do. If you want to do so. The main way that you unlock Rise is around these 3 units here. Kennen, Poppy, and Jinzhao. Now, Poppy and Kennen are both unlocks based on different conditions, right? Poppy, you need to field Demacian or Yordle with 2 items, and then Kennen, you need 8-star levels of Ionia, Yordle, or Defender. So they still have unlock conditions. They're not impossible, right? When it says 8-star levels, it doesn't have to be 8 of Ionia. It can be like 2 of Ionia, 2 of Yordle, and 4 of Defender, you know, so your boards actually can unlock them pretty easily in that sense. But the idea is, these 3 units, they're all triple trait synergies, and they synergize with each other very nicely. This allows you to fit the 5 region traits with just 8 units, because you'll have these 3, right? You activate Yordle, you can activate Demacia and Ionia by playing any Demacian and Ionian. Here I just put Jarvan and Shen. These can be any units, by the way, so if you can structure your board differently, you can play anything in place of these units. I want to make that very clear. I just picked random ones. Then all you need is 1 2 trait and a Targon. So in this case, I put Loris, and then I put Seraphine, and then obviously we have the Zoe. This is one way to unlock Rise with only 8 units. There is another way. I think it revolves around playing Vi, but it's I think you have to be level 9 for that. But either way, you can switch these units, right? This can be a 2 trait in terms of Shadow Isle. This can be Shurima. Any 2 trait here. works, but Piltover is just like the easiest one to hit if you're just trying to roll for it. And then obviously any Targon. The board itself is very weak. You're gonna have to pivot out of it, and I think on level 8 it's also gonna be hard to fit in traits that really scale to Rise well, because obviously you won't be able to fit in that many region traits. So Rise to me is more of a level 9 unit. I'm just showing you like one of the easy ways to unlock them on level 8. Even if you don't play this particular trait synergy or trait web, these 3 units are usually the cornerstone of being really reliable to unlock the unit. So I would definitely hold on to these 3 if you're thinking about angling or thinking about optimizing around Rise. And like I said, there are other ways to do this. Another 3 trait that is pretty nice to slot in is Vi, but it's just a little bit awkward. It really depends on which board is easier to stabilize around. Right now there's not like a great Zon carry except for like Singed, which doesn't really fit in the Vi board very well. And also there's Freylord versions that you could unlock the Rise and pivot into. I'm trying to find Vi so I can just show you. Yeah, because Vi is Piltover Zon. So she has 2 traits here that you can activate, and you can play it similarly and activate her through Zon Piltover. But it's just a little bit more awkward. Like I said, Rise I think is a level 9 board, but this is the one that's really important. Just having these 3 units. Usually you start it with a Jinzhao Poppy, and then you get a couple star levels, and then eventually you hit the Kennen. Probably by level 8, you just build towards the synergies that are already on your board, and then just make sure to hold on to any Demacian, any Ionian, and then a 2 trait and a Targon. So it's pretty simple at that point. But that's just the way to unlock Rise. But anyways, those are all of the useful traits, useful units that I think for the set. Like I said, the most important one is probably the one that I started with over here. And then I just want to go through some of the other things and some of the specifics for unlocks. Of course, there are lots of other units that are like that, but usually they're more tied to vertical traits, like getting a Graze through a Twisted Fate, and then like, you know, getting like different Noxus units with earlier Noxus units. But those ones I think are a little bit more natural in the way that they come out of the game. And then obviously like the rest of the utility that hopefully is useful. I'll probably remake these or make them like more clear cut in a like set 16 launch guide that I want to make. So hopefully, you know, if you're not watching this one, or if you're not taking super notes on this one, I'll make it a little bit more nicely formatted when the set actually launches. Anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great day and see ya. Bye bye.